She had worked in that mansion for 15 years and never once asked for anything. Not a raise. Not a day off. Not even a word of thanks. She just showed up, did her work, and loved the little girl she was raising alone. But one morning, she didn't show up anymore. And what she left behind, something small, something golden, something she had pressed into her 3-year-old daughter's tiny hands the night before, would crack open a secret so dark it would bring an entire family to its knees. The question is, who knew it first? And just like that, you already know this story isn't going to let you go. Welcome back to Heart and Truth, the channel where we sit with real people, real pain, and real moments that remind us what it means to be human. Before we go further, drop your country and flag in the comments. I love seeing where you're watching from. It feels like lighting up a whole map of the world. Now, what happens next in this story will quietly break your heart in a way you won't expect. Let's begin. The house sat at the end of a long private road just outside of Greenwich, Connecticut, and in the early weeks of October, when the maple trees along the driveway turned the color of fire, it looked like something out of a painting, the kind of place people drove past slowly just to stare. It was a 3-story Georgian mansion with tall white columns and black shutters, surrounded by 4 acres of manicured lawn that faded into a patch of old-growth woods in the back. In the mornings, mist came off the pond near the tree line and curled up over the grass like something breathing. Autumn in Greenwich smelled like cold earth and wood smoke, and if you stood at the kitchen window long enough, you could hear the wind move through the red maples and sound almost like a voice. Rosa Mendez had been standing at that kitchen window for 15 years. She came to the mansion in her late 20s, just a few months after her husband walked out and left her alone in a 1-bedroom apartment in Bridgeport with a box of unpaid bills and a heart that didn't know yet how badly it was broken. She found the job through a church friend. Housekeeper needed. Live-in. Good pay. Private family. She took it the same afternoon she called. The Hargrove family, William Hargrove Sr. and his wife Catherine, were old money, the quiet kind. They didn't throw parties. They didn't talk loudly. They moved through their home the way people move through a church, carefully, like the walls could hear them. And in many ways, Rosa became invisible to them, which in that world meant she was doing her job perfectly. She woke every morning at 5:15. Not because anyone told her to, not because it was in her contract. She just did. She'd pull on her gray uniform, braid her dark hair back, and start the coffee before the first light touched the kitchen tiles. She knew which floorboards creaked and avoided them. She knew Mr. Hargrove took his eggs soft, never hard, and that Mrs. Hargrove didn't actually like the flowers she ordered delivered every Thursday. She just liked the ritual of receiving them. Rosa knew things. That was her gift, and in a way, her quiet curse. She was a woman who noticed everything and said almost nothing. In 15 years, she had learned every corner of that house, which drawer stuck in humid weather, which chandelier needed its bulbs replaced every 8 months, which guest room smelled faintly of mildew no matter how many times she aired it out. She moved through the mansion like she was part of its structure. Like the house couldn't quite function without her, even if no one said so. She had one joy that was fully her own.
Her daughter, Lily.
Lily Mendez was 3 years old that October, a small girl with her mother's dark eyes and a laugh that was too big for her little body. She had been born during Rosa's 5th year at the Hargrove house, and when it became clear that there was no family to help and no childcare Rosa could afford, Mrs. Hargrove had done something unexpected. She'd said simply, "She can stay here. We have the room." It wasn't warmth, exactly. It was practicality. But Rosa received it like grace. Lily grew up in the east wing of the mansion. She had a small room with yellow curtains that Rosa had sewn herself, and she spent her mornings toddling after her mother through the long hallways, sometimes clutching a stuffed rabbit she called Mr. Flops, sometimes just watching Rosa work with those serious dark eyes, taking in everything the same way her mother did. People in the house were fond of Lily the way they were fond of a pet, pleasantly, at a distance. But Rosa was her whole world, and Rosa knew it, And that knowledge was both the most beautiful and the most terrifying thing she had ever carried. Because Rosa had started to feel unwell. Not dramatically. Not in any way she could name precisely. It began with headaches that arrived in the late afternoons and didn't leave until morning. Then a tiredness that sat behind her eyes and didn't lift even after sleep. She told herself it was the season changing. She told herself it was the long hours, the stone floors under her feet all day, the years finally catching up. She didn't tell anyone else. There was one person in the house she was closest to, not close the way friends are close, but close the way people become when they spend years near each other without pretending. His name was Daniel Hargrove, William Sr.'s son, now 34, who had come back to the family house 2 years ago after his divorce in Boston. Daniel was tall and quiet and slightly awkward in his own home, the way people are when they've spent too many years trying to leave a place and then end up back anyway. He noticed Rosa. Not in a strange way. Just he saw her. He asked how she was, and meant it. He'd once spent 20 minutes helping her carry boxes up from the cellar when every other person in the house walked past without looking. "You don't have to do that," Rosa had told him. "I know," he said, and kept carrying. She trusted him the way she trusted very few people, carefully, and only a little at a time. What Rosa didn't know was that Daniel had recently become engaged. Her name was Vivian Cole, 31, elegant, with a kind of polished beauty that photographed perfectly and felt slightly cold in person. She had arrived at the mansion for the first time in September, 3 weeks before the story truly begins, and Rosa had been the one to prepare the guest room for her stay. Vivian had looked at Rosa exactly once when she arrived, a brief, flat glance, and then looked away. Rosa had noted it, filed it, said nothing. That was also her gift. The night before everything changed, Rosa had been in Lily's room after bath time, sitting on the edge of the yellow-curtained bed while Lily pulled at the buttons of her pajama top with fierce concentration. On the small dresser was a gold necklace, a thin chain with a small oval pendant, that Rosa had worn for almost a decade. A gift, once, from someone who was no longer in her life. She had kept it because it was real gold, and because it was beautiful, and because some things you keep even when their story hurts. She took it off that night and held it in her palm for a long moment. Then she pressed it into Lily's small hand and folded her daughter's fingers around it. "This is Mama's last keepsake," she said softly. "Keep it safe, my love." Lily looked at it with her serious eyes, then looked at her mother. Rosa smiled. She tucked her daughter in. She turned off the lamp. Down the hall, the large house breathed and settled in the dark, the way old houses do. But something felt different that night. Something Rosa couldn't name, even to herself. Have you ever had a moment where you couldn't explain why, but some part of you felt like it might be the last time? The last time doing something you love, being somewhere safe, holding someone close? By the time October had fully arrived, the kind that makes Greenwich feel like the whole world has gone amber and still, things in the Hargrove mansion had shifted in ways too quiet to point to directly. Rosa noticed it the way she noticed everything in the margins. A door to the library that used to be open was now kept shut. Dinner conversations, once sparse but predictable, now dropped entirely to silence when Rosa entered to clear plates. Mrs. Hargrove, who had always been distant, was now also watchful, and there is a significant difference between someone who doesn't see you and someone who is making sure not to be seen looking. Vivian had settled into the house with the confidence of someone who already knew where everything was, even when she didn't. She spoke to staff, including Rosa, in the crisp, impersonal tone of a woman who had grown up with people serving her, who understood that warmth toward the help was a performance and had decided not to bother performing. Rosa kept her own counsel. She made the beds. She polished the silver. She picked Lily up from her corner of the East Wing each afternoon and held her for a moment longer than necessary before setting her down again. There was one afternoon, a Thursday, the day the flowers arrived, when Daniel found Rosa in the East Garden, raking the first fallen leaves into a pile while Lily sat in the grass nearby, pressing acorns into the dirt with intense focus. He sat down on the iron bench nearby, without saying anything first. Rosa kept raking. She's good at that, he said finally, nodding toward Lily. She's good at everything she decides to care about, Rosa said. Like her father. It was the first time she had mentioned Lily's father in years, to anyone. Daniel looked at her for a moment. You doing okay, Rosa? She paused the raking. I'm fine. You look tired. I am tired, she said simply, and went back to the leaves. It was the truest thing she said to anyone that whole month. What neither of them could know, what Rosa was only beginning to understand herself, was that the tiredness wasn't just tiredness. The headaches had gotten worse. In the last week, she had started getting dizzy in the middle of simple tasks, making the bed, folding towels, walking up the stairs. Twice she had gripped the banister with both hands and waited for the world to stop tilting. She had not told a doctor. She couldn't explain why. Perhaps because naming something makes it real. Perhaps because Lily was her whole reason, and the thought of what naming it could mean was something she wasn't ready to hold yet. The evening everything began to fracture began with a dinner party, small by Hargrove standards, just 8 people, old Connecticut family friends, the kind who dressed for dinner, even on a Tuesday. Rosa prepared the table. She ironed the napkins. She polished the crystal until it rang faintly when she held it to the light. Vivian came down the stairs at 7 o'clock in a dark green dress, her hair pinned back, wearing, and this is the detail that would later stop the clock, a gold necklace. Thin chain. Small oval pendant. Rosa was across the room when Vivian descended the stairs.
She saw it.
And everything in her body went very, very still. She looked again. Then she looked away because that is what years of service train you to do. But her mind would not let go of what her eyes had just confirmed. That necklace. The exact length. The exact pendant. The oval with the faint hairline scratch on the left edge from the time Rosa had dropped it on the kitchen tile 3 years ago. That was her necklace. The one she had pressed into Lily's hand 8 nights ago and called her last keepsake. Lily was in the East Wing. The necklace was around Vivian's neck. Rosa did not drop anything. She did not make a sound. She set the final wine glass on the table with the same careful hands she used every evening, and she walked back to the kitchen, and she stood at the sink for a long moment looking out at the dark pond at the edge of the lawn. She thought, I will ask Lily in the morning. She thought, there must be an explanation. She thought, children lose things. She pressed her palms flat against the cold edge of the sink and breathed. In the dining room, the dinner party began. Laughter floated down the hall. Rosa stayed in the kitchen. She kept Lily's door closed that night after tucking her in, which she never usually did. She sat in the chair beside the small dresser in the dark, listening to her daughter breathe, and felt something she could not quite name settle over her. A heavy, gray feeling like a sky before a storm that hasn't broken yet. The following morning, Rosa woke at 5:15 as always. She felt worse than she had in weeks. The dizziness came before she was even fully upright. She sat on the edge of her bed for several minutes, waiting. She made the coffee. She checked on Lily. She did not look for the necklace yet. She wasn't ready. Instead, she did what she always did when something was wrong. She worked. She stripped the guest linens in the East Wing hallway. She wiped down the baseboards in the formal dining room. She reorganized the pantry by expiration date. Around 9 in the morning, while Vivian was still asleep, Rosa went quietly to Lily's room and knelt beside her daughter, who was sitting on the floor with Mr. Flops. Baby, Rosa said softly, where is Mama's necklace? The gold one Mama gave you. Lily looked up at her with her serious eyes. The pretty lady took it, she said. Rosa went very still. Which pretty lady? Lily pointed toward the main hallway, toward the part of the house where Vivian's room was. Rosa nodded slowly. She smoothed her daughter's hair. She stood up. She was dizzy again. She held the doorframe. The pretty lady took it. 3 days later, Rosa Mendez was found unconscious in the 3rd-floor linen closet. She was taken to Greenwich Hospital by ambulance. She did not come home. The house was very quiet the morning after. Lily waited by the east wing door for a long time. No one came. Have you ever watched someone carry something too heavy for too long, alone, and only realized afterward that they were asking for help in the only language they had left? And then, in a single ordinary moment, everything became something else entirely. It was a Sunday afternoon, 3 weeks after Rosa's death. The word they used, past, felt too soft for what had happened.
Too quiet.
Rosa Mendez had not slipped peacefully into anything. She had collapsed on a stone floor alone, in a house she had given 15 years of her life to, and by the time help arrived, it was already a question of hours. The doctors at Greenwich Hospital had used clinical language. Hemorrhagic stroke. Rapid onset. The kind of thing that announces itself as a headache, then a dizzy spell, then silence. Rosa had known something was wrong. She had known for weeks. She had not told anyone. Not even Daniel. Not even Lily. The coroner's report was clean. Natural causes. The case was closed before it was opened. Lily was now living in the East Wing because there was nowhere else for her to go yet. Rosa had no family in Connecticut, and the distant relatives in Bridgeport had not yet been contacted. Mrs. Hargrove, to her credit, had said simply, "She stays until there's a plan." Daniel made sure she had meals. He made sure someone sat with her at night until she fell asleep. Lily was 4 years old now, or close enough. Old enough to say mama, and know what the word meant. Old enough to wait by a door. Old enough to carry a grief she had no container for yet. The Sunday afternoon began with a small family gathering, not a celebration, nothing formal. Just Daniel's cousin Arthur and his wife in from New Haven, and Vivian, who had decided to host an early lunch in the main sitting room with a confidence that Rosa, in life, would have noted and filed and said nothing about. Vivian came downstairs in a cream-colored blouse, hair loose, and the gold necklace. She wore it openly,
Casually.
the way you wear something you believe is already yours. Lily was in the hallway. She had slipped out of the East Wing the way small children do, quietly, invisibly, Mr. Flops tucked under one arm. She had been standing near the foot of the staircase, watching the adults move through the sitting room the way she always watched things, with those serious eyes that missed nothing. Vivian descended the last few stairs, and Lily looked up. The child's eyes went to the necklace. She went completely still, and then the sound she made. It was not a cry exactly. It was something raw and animal and true, the kind of sound that bypasses language and comes straight from the body. "That's my mother's." The room stopped. Every adult in that hallway and sitting room, Arthur and his wife, Daniel, Mrs. Hargrove who had come out from the study, all of them turned. Vivian went pale. Then she recovered herself.
Quickly.
With the practiced smoothness of a woman who had handled scrutiny before. "Sweetheart," she said, bending slightly toward Lily with a patient smile. "This was a gift from Daniel. You can ask him." She looked up at Daniel. Daniel was looking at the necklace. Not at Vivian. At the necklace. His jaw was tight. "Daniel?" Vivian said, her voice still smooth. He walked toward her slowly. He reached out. He held the pendant between 2 fingers and turned it slightly in the light. On the left edge of the oval pendant, a faint hairline scratch. He had seen that scratch before. He had watched Rosa absently rub her thumb over it sometimes when she was thinking, standing at the kitchen sink, or sitting in the East Garden, or holding Lily's hand while the little girl fell asleep. He had noticed it the way you notice small things about someone you've paid attention to for years. "Where did you get this?" His voice was quiet. "I told you. It was Vivian." He said her name and nothing else. The room was so quiet that when Lily made a small sound, not crying, just breathing, clutching Mr. Flops, everyone heard it. Vivian stood very still for a moment. Then she set her jaw and said, "I found it. In the hallway. Someone had dropped it." No one in the room moved. Daniel looked at his mother. His mother looked at the floor. Arthur and his wife looked at each other. Lily said, softly, with absolute certainty. The pretty lady came into my room and took it. The sitting room felt like the inside of a held breath. Daniel stepped back from Vivian. Just one step. But in that house, in that room, in that silence, it was the loudest thing that had happened in weeks. He took out his phone. He walked to the other end of the hallway. What he found, in the next 30 minutes, would not be found through magic or luck or instinct. It would be found because old houses have old habits, and one of the Hargrove house's oldest habits was the small security camera mounted above the door to the east wing, installed years ago to monitor that corridor after a break-in scare, largely forgotten about, never removed. The footage from 8 days before Rose's death showed, at 11:47 p.m., a figure in the hallway. Vivian. She entered Lily's room. She was inside for less than 3 minutes. When she came out, she had the necklace. This alone would have been damning. Stealing from a child who had just been given her dying mother's last keepsake.
Cold.
Calculated. Full. But Daniel kept watching the footage. He went back further. And what he found there, what had been captured by that old camera in the 2 weeks before Rosa collapsed, was something so much darker than a stolen necklace that his hands went cold and his breath left him slowly, like air from a punctured tire. In the footage, there were visits. Vivian entering the East Wing late at night while Rosa was still alive. Not to Rosa's room. Never to Rosa's room. To the small supply closet where Rosa kept her personal things, including the small unlocked box where Rosa kept, among other things, a bottle of iron supplements her doctor had prescribed the previous spring. Vivian on camera, opening that box, removing the bottle, replacing it with another bottle. Same label, same size, different contents, which the forensic toxicology report would later confirm after Daniel brought the footage to the police, after the old bottle was found at the back of Vivian's luggage, after they tested it. Not iron supplements. High-dose blood thinners.
Crushed.
Re-encapsulated. The kind of thing that, taken daily by someone already prone to vascular pressure, would cause exactly what had happened to Rosa Mendez in a third-floor linen closet on a Thursday morning in October. The kind of thing that looked, without investigation, like a natural stroke. The kind of thing that only gets caught when a 4-year-old girl stands at the bottom of a staircase, sees a gold necklace around a woman's neck, and cries out with everything she has left. Daniel sat in that hallway for a long time after he stopped the footage. The house around him was very quiet. Lily was in the East Wing. She had fallen asleep on her small bed with Mr. Flops, and her face in sleep was so completely her mother's that anyone who had known Rosa would have had to look away. What would you do if you were in Daniel's place right now, holding footage that proves the woman you planned to marry killed the woman who trusted you most? Tell us honestly in the comments. He hadn't slept. He hadn't cried. He just sat with it. Daniel Hargrove spent that Sunday night in the kitchen. Not drinking. Not pacing. Just sitting at the table where Rosa had made coffee for 15 years, in the chair closest to the window that looked out over the dark lawn and the dark pond and the dark tree line beyond, and he let the thing he had learned become real inside him.
It took a long time.
The human mind does not absorb certain truths quickly. It circles them, tests the edges,
Pulls back.
returns. And the truth Daniel was holding was not the kind with soft edges. Vivian was still in the house. He hadn't called the police yet. He hadn't gone to his mother yet. He had simply stood up from the hallway floor, walked to the kitchen, and sat down.
He didn't know why.
It felt like the only room in the house that still made sense. By 2 a.m, Arthur and his wife had left. They'd sensed something without knowing what, the way people do when the air in a room changes. Mrs. Hargrove had gone upstairs. Vivian had gone to the guest suite, where she would later, in court, claim she had spent the evening in perfect innocence. At 3:15, Daniel's phone was still in his hand. He had the police non-emergency number on screen. He had typed the address. He hadn't pressed call. He kept thinking of something Rosa had said to him once, only once and briefly, in the East Garden the autumn before. He had asked her if she was happy here. Not as an employer. Genuinely. She had considered it for a long time. "I'm safe here," she said finally. "Lily is safe here." That's not the same as happy, but it's something. He had thought at the time that it was a small and quiet thing to say. He understood now that it was the truest, most distilled thing she had ever offered him, a woman who had given up on asking for more than safety and who had still, in the end, not been given even that. He pressed call at 4:02 in the morning. The detective who arrived at 7:15 was a woman named Patricia Rios, compact, unhurried, with eyes that took inventory of a room the moment she walked into it. She listened to Daniel without expression. She watched the footage twice. She did not editorialize. When she was done, she said, "Is Miss Cole still on the premises?" "Yes." "Don't speak to her. Don't let her know you've called."
Can you do that?
"Yes." She left him in the kitchen and walked to the East Wing first, because she had seen on the footage the child, Lily, and Detective Rios was a woman who understood that in a case like this, the smallest person in the room is often the most important. Lily was awake. She was sitting up in her yellow-curtained bed with Mr. Flops, looking at the door as if she had been expecting someone. The detective knelt to her level.
"Hi," she said.
"My name is Patricia. I'm a friend of the family." Lily looked at her for a moment. "Are you here about the necklace?" Detective Rios looked at the little girl for a long, careful moment.
"Yes," she said.
"I am." "I told the truth," Lily said. "The pretty lady took it." "I know you did. You were very brave to say so." Lily considered this. "Mama said always tell the truth even when it's scary. She said that's how things get fixed." The detective nodded slowly. She reached out and touched Lily's hand once, brief, professional, but real. Then she stood up and went to find Vivian. Vivian was arrested at 9:43 that morning before breakfast, in the upstairs hallway with her coat already on and a bag that was already packed. She had not slept either. She had, it seemed, calculated the odds sometime in the night and decided they were not in her favor. She did not go quietly. She said things, first to the officers, then to Daniel as they passed him in the hallway, that were designed to dismantle accusations, redirections, the specific kind of calm cruelty that only people who have practiced it for years can produce on short notice. Daniel stood against the wall and let her words pass him. He watched her go through the front door and thought, with a strange clarity, I didn't really know her at all. And then, immediately after, Rosa knew. Rosa knew from the first day. He thought of the look Rosa had filed and said nothing about. He closed the front door. In the sitting room, Mrs. Hargrove was on the sofa. Her hands were in her lap. She was very still. She looked, for the first time Daniel could remember, small. "She worked here for 15 years, his mother said finally.
"Yes," Daniel said.
"And we never," she stopped. He didn't finish it for her. Some things need to be left incomplete because completing them would let people off too easy. He went instead to the East Wing. Lily was still in her room. Someone had brought her breakfast, a small bowl of oatmeal with a spoon she hadn't touched. She was at the window, watching the driveway from her yellow-curtained room with those serious eyes. Daniel sat on the floor beside the window.
He didn't say anything.
Lily didn't either. After a while, she climbed down from the windowsill and sat next to him. She put her hand on his knee. "Is the pretty lady gone?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "She's gone." Lily nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already known. They sat together on the floor of the yellow-curtained room for a long time. Outside, the last of the October maples had gone from red to brown, and the lawn was covered in leaves, and the pond at the edge of the property was still and gray as a mirror. Daniel Hargrove knew, sitting there, that a choice was forming. The kind that doesn't announce itself dramatically, it arrives in the quiet. He didn't know yet exactly what shape it would take, but he knew it involved this small girl next to him, with her serious eyes and her mother's hands, who had already survived more loss than anyone 4 years old should ever have to hold. He knew that doing the easy thing now would cost him something he wouldn't be able to get back. The right thing was harder. It would take months. It would involve lawyers and hearings and a child who had no one and a man who had never thought of himself as the kind of person who stepped forward. But choices don't wait for you to feel ready. The leaf from the maple nearest the window let go and drifted down to the grass below. Lily watched it fall. Have you ever faced a moment where the right thing to do was the hardest thing you could imagine, and you had to choose anyway? Some things can't be undone, but some things don't need to be. By the time the Connecticut winter had fully settled over Greenwich, the pond frozen at the edges, the maples bare and black against a pale sky, the legal proceedings against Vivian Cole were moving with the slow, grinding certainty of justice when it finally arrives. The forensic toxicology report had confirmed what the footage had implied. The capsules in the replaced bottle contained warfarin, a blood thinner, in doses carefully calibrated to look accidental when distributed over weeks. The medical examiner's office reopened Rosa Mendez's case and amended the cause of death from natural causes to homicide. It took 6 weeks and 3 hearings before the word was official. In a courthouse in Stamford, in a wood-paneled room with fluorescent lighting and old radiators that clanked in the cold, Vivian Cole was charged with first-degree murder. She sat at the defendant's table in a gray blazer. She did not look at Daniel, who sat in the second row of the gallery and kept his eyes on the judge. She did not look at Detective Rios, who sat in the first row with a manila folder and a stillness that said she had been in rooms like this before and would be again. She stared at the wall above the judge's head and let her lawyers speak. Daniel had been asked, by his mother's attorney, to stay out of the proceedings as much as possible for the family's sake, for optics, for all the careful reasons that old money families give when they want to preserve the appearance of order. He had declined. He attended every hearing.
He gave a statement when asked. Clear.
Factual. Without drama. After the charges were formally read and Vivian was remanded to custody, Daniel walked out of the courthouse into the January cold and stood on the stone steps for a long moment with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the bare trees across the street. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel closure, that tidy word people use to describe something that doesn't actually close. He felt something more honest and harder to name, the particular exhaustion of a person who has done the right thing in full and now has to figure out what comes next. What came next was Lily. The hearing for her guardianship had been scheduled for the following March. Daniel's attorney had filed the paperwork in November, quietly at first, then more formally as it became clear no family member was stepping forward and the state was beginning to look at foster placement. Mrs. Hargrove had not objected. She had, in fact, done something that surprised her son. She had sat across from him at the kitchen table one evening in December and said, carefully, as if each word cost something, Rosa gave 15 years to this house. The least this house can do is give something back. It was not an apology. It was not large. But it was, Daniel understood, as close to one as his mother was capable of, and he received it as such. The guardianship hearing was a gray March morning. Lily wore a blue dress that Daniel had no idea how to iron properly and that turned out slightly wrinkled, which Lily pointed out very seriously, which made the family court judge almost smile. Lily sat next to Daniel the entire hearing, coloring a horse in a coloring book she'd brought in her small backpack, pausing occasionally to look up at the room with her serious eyes, then returning to the horse. When the judge asked her, gently, if she understood why she was here, Lily put down her crayon. Mr. Daniel is going to be my family now, she said. Because my mama is gone and he is good. The courtroom was very quiet. How do you know he's good? The judge asked. Lily thought about it. Because when mama was sick, he was the one who asked, she said. Nobody else asked. He asked. That was all she said. She picked up her crayon and went back to the horse. The ruling took 12 minutes. In the parking lot afterward, Lily held Daniel's hand and dragged him to look at a puddle that had an oil-slick rainbow in it, which she found genuinely wonderful and pointed at with a seriousness that made Daniel laugh. The first real laugh, he realized, since October. It's a rainbow, she informed him. In the ground. Yes, he said. It is. She looked up at him. Mama would have liked it. Yes, he said. She would have. There is a photograph, taken by Arthur's wife in the Hargrove kitchen that March evening after the hearing, when the family had gathered for a quiet dinner, that sits now in a small silver frame on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. The same window where Rosa had stood for 15 years, watching the lawn, watching the pond, watching the mist come off the water in the mornings. In the photo, Daniel is at the sink, washing dishes. Lily is beside him on a step stool, her idea, with a dish towel that is too big for her, drying a bowl with tremendous concentration. They're not looking at the camera. They are just doing the ordinary, necessary work of the day. Around Lily's neck, on a thin gold chain, is a small oval pendant. Daniel had found it in an evidence return envelope 6 weeks after Vivian's arrest. The necklace, cleaned and documented and released back to its rightful owner. He had taken it directly to Lily. She had held it in both hands for a long moment. Then she had held it out to Daniel. "Can you put it on?" she asked. "Mama used to put it on." He had fumbled with the tiny clasp for longer than he would admit, but he got it. It settled against her chest where it belonged. She looked down at it, then back up at him. "Okay," she said. Simply, as though something had been completed. There are people in this world who are invisible until they aren't, who give and give and give until they're gone, and only then does the space they occupied become visible, loud and aching and impossible to fill. Rosa Mendez was one of those people. She didn't get to see justice. She didn't get to see her daughter settled and safe and loved. She only got to press a gold necklace into a small hand and call it her last keepsake, not knowing it would also be the thing that told the truth. But truth has its own timing. And it chose a 4-year-old girl at the bottom of a staircase. Sometimes the smallest person in the room is the one who changes everything. To you watching this right now, if you have someone in your life who shows up quietly, who works without applause, who gives without being asked, see them. Say it today. Don't wait for their absence to make it obvious. The most important things are said while there is still time to say them. Rosa deserved that. You have someone who deserves it too. If this story moved you, if you felt that moment when Lily looked up and said, "That's my mother's," and something in your chest shifted, hit that like button for Rosa. For a woman who deserved to be seen, and a little girl who made sure she was. This channel exists for exactly this. Real people, real love, real loss. Stories that remind us we're all more connected than we think. If that's what you're looking for, subscribe and we'll keep showing up for you. Now here's what I want to hear from you. When have you ever noticed something small that everyone else missed? Something that mattered enormously, but only you saw it? Drop it in the comments. Those quiet moments of noticing might be more important than you know. And if you know someone who has spent years giving to people who never quite said thank you, share the story with them today. Let it be the thank you. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you in the next one.